Let's talk about tourist visa denials. We'll continue on in the format of our last video where I answered questions from viewers. So questions like, what are some common reasons for tourist visa denials and how do you avoid them? What actions can you take if you get denied? How soon before you can apply again? Etc. Hi, I'm Soyuna Tag. I'm an attorney and one of the founders of Simvisa. We release videos about US law, immigration, and other related topics. If this is of interest to you and you want to know more about how the law can serve you, please subscribe. By the way, if you haven't already, please check out our video where I answer some of the questions people put in the comments of our tourist visa interview video. So actually, we'll link them both here and in the notes, as these may be helpful for your journey. What are some common reasons for tourist visa denials and how do you avoid them? Well, right off the bat, I would say having inconsistencies. That would be a reason for having a visa denied. So, okay, first of all, I'm making the assumption that the person is not lying or using fraudulent documents, because that's not cool. But I'm talking about having inconsistencies between the things you say, what's in the DS application or the other documents you bring, as well as with what the consular officer already knows about you. So within and between all those things, you don't want to have inconsistencies. So what can you do to avoid this? First of all, don't have inconsistencies and be proactive. For example, if between submitting the DS form and then, the interview, things changed, like you got a new job, well, then definitely be proactive, about, that change, and definitely bring supporting documents in case you need them to, disclose to the officer that, some facts have changed since you last applied. There's no sin in getting a new job or things like that. Also, don't try to hide information or thinking that, that's going to go down a wrong path or something like that. Because a lot of times when the officer is asking a question, the officer probably even knows the answer. So it's the best policy to just be obviously truthful and disclose, information that's relevant to the question that they're asking you. Because you don't, again, want to have an inconsistency between you saying, my family members, not that close to them, or I don't like them, so I'm not going to mention them. Well, no, if they directly ask you what family members do you have in the United States, then you'd want to answer that. And the reason it's really important not to have inconsistencies is because the whole interview, it is so much about credibility. It's really because the main point of the interview is for the officer to determine whether you will leave the United States after your touristic visit is over. So meaning that you do not have immigrant intent and that you will also otherwise not violate the terms and conditions of your tourist visa. And that could be like, by engaging in unauthorized work or doing, other things that are not allowed or legal. And that whole determination happens in just these very short minutes. And the officer is really relying on his or her their sense of you telling the truth, whether you're being truthful or not. And so when you have inconsistencies, that really takes your credibility down. And by the way, so the number one official reason for denial of a tourist visa application is this notion of immigrant intent. And you need to be able to present yourself at the interview and overcome the legal presumption that everybody's an intending immigrant. I know this sounds kind of crazy, but that is the legal presumption that it's your duty and your burden to overcome that presumption. So again, it comes down all to credibility. I would also add that credibility is best established through the, person-to-person direct communication rather than documents. So with that in mind, I would say another common reason for denial would be, relying on what you think or are told are supposed to do, or say versus being your true authentic self. This can take the form of giving generic answers to the officer's questions. So like as if you have a script, or maybe you've actually practiced a script, which would be a terrible idea. And believe me, if someone told you this is what you need to say to get your visa approved, whatever that thing is, the officers have heard it a million times and have heard them all. So again, what you need to do is answer with your very specific and true reasons so that you don't just look like you're actually, trying to pull one over them and just giving some scripted answer that everybody uses. Again, doing that really tanks your credibility. Another form that this can take is, trying to be or appear as something other than yourself. And that can be something from looking, trying to look super deadpan serious when that is just not your personality and your energy, or, or just looking dead. Officers go through interview after interview after interview. And again, this is a person-to-person interview, and that's the most important part. So you really want to be present and authentic and, be a real person with real reasons and, real motivations. So again, be yourself. And, if you're a really cranky person, I would say don't be your good self, but it really helps to try to be present and really answer the interview and not think so much about how should I appear, or they like people who look like this or are of doing this kind of thing. No, be yourself. And that's really your best shot at establishing credibility. And that goes to, if you try to do all that, especially, you would probably come off looking super nervous. Now, it's human to be nervous. This is not a normal social interaction going to a visa interview. So it's totally fine and normal to be nervous. But I think when you try to layer upon all these, kind of requirements on yourself, you'll come across actually looking less trustworthy and less credible because you'll be so extra nervous. To that end, one thing you can do to help, I know you made all this effort. You want to, visit the United States, but you really do need to try to keep things in perspective and try to tell yourself it's not the end of the world, even if, this doesn't work out. And I'm not saying that to be you don't care. No, of course, you're doing this because you want to go and visit the United States, but that might help you have less head garbage and actually present yourself as your true self versus getting super nervous and looking, overly nervous and suspicious. To this end, try to rely on documents. And I really want to point out here that there's zero obligation for an officer to look at any of your documents. Now, we do still advise people to have supporting documents as backup should it become necessary, but you're not entitled to the officer taking time to actually read and review these things. Mainly they're speaking with you, and that's the primary thing of the minutes of the interview. And that's how those minutes should and are spent. I do want you to have documents so that in case anything is needed, it's on hand and you can support what you're saying should that become necessary. But don't be no, please look at the documents, or you can't get out of answering the officer's questions and having a person-to-person interaction just by having a gazillion documents, which they're probably not even going to look at. The next question is, what actions can you take if you get denied? First, I would try to get a really good understanding as to the reasons for the denial. You will probably just get a generic denial letter citing to the fact that you've not overcome the presumption that you're an intending immigrant. So that probably won't help you much, but this is where you really want to think about what transpired in those few short minutes of the tourist visa interview. And so you can get an understanding of what, was the cause or the reason for the denial. And doing this, it may be helpful to at least have a consultation with an attorney because, together you may see things that may not necessarily be so evident to you. And I've seen this happen where I go over specifically, what happened at the interview. And then I see something just because I know how these things often, more about it than probably that person going into a tourist visa interview for the first time. Then as to taking further action regarding your denial, I would say time is of the essence. And this is especially true if you believe that your denial was based on a clear misunderstanding or a clear error. So please address this as soon as possible, ASAP. You don't want this denial based on a clear misunderstanding or error to just sit out there as if it's okay. Here again, working with an attorney may be helpful in your situation. And the attorney can help determine if the best way to address this is either by reapplying right away or taking it up kind of more directly with the consulate. So, different factors go into this. For example, prior to COVID, you could probably get another tourist visa interview scheduled in a couple weeks even. So that definitely is not letting the denial sit too long. But nowadays, in many places, if you reapply for another tourist visa interview, that could be months and months and months later. So then the decision would just be kind of sitting there. So there are decisions, different factors that go into this. Also keep in mind that when there is no actual appeals process with the consulate for this type of denial. But when you go in again, you would typically be seen by a different consular officer. And, so it would not be the same person who denied you just like 2 weeks ago seeing you again. Also, if it's based on a clear misunderstanding or an error, then obviously here you really want to thoroughly have an explanation and documentation so that you can really take this up. And this can also, of course, be really helpful if you're directly corresponding with the consulate. And about this, I want to point out that when attorneys, help do this, they have to kind of walk a very fine line of being persistent and professional in communicating with the consulate. So, and there's no guarantee that having an attorney will suddenly give you a magical result of overturning the prior decision or anything like that. But I've certainly seen some good results where there's been attorney representation. So that may be something for you to consider. Oh, and let me add that when I'm talking about taking it up directly with a consulate, I'm talking about corresponding with them, typically by email. And, this is where you would make the inquiry or explain what happened. And they're not necessarily, immediately responsive. So as I mentioned again, it would take some, professional persistence or you being kind of persistent and not letting it go. So there's a bit of that involved in trying to get a response back. But again, I think I mentioned in a different video, I've had some success with a consulate where, a particular client got denied and, it really was unclear. And we were a bit at a loss as to what the problem was because this person had a 10-year multiple entry tourist visa before that expired and thought, no biggie, I'm just going to go in to get another one. And I've complied with the terms and conditions, traveled for, short vacations for like the past 10 years, maybe every year or every other year. And the person was denied. So, when we were a bit at a loss, then, we kept pursuing, and trying to get in touch with the consulate. And eventually the result was we did learn from the consulate what it was. And then we were able to go ahead and address that. So, it's not always the most, straightforward road to go, but that may definitely be something, that may help you out. How soon before you can reapply or apply again after denial? So there is no actual time restriction. You can just turn around, like I mentioned before, and just apply right away. Now, some consulates do state on their website that if you've had multiple denials, then they, recommend you to wait at least 6 months before trying again, unless there's been some clear change in facts. Now, having said that, putting aside what I said about if there's something that you can address right away, you should do so ASAP. But each time you apply, that's time, money, stress, and I don't think it makes sense to subject yourself to that. And I don't want you to subject yourself to that unless there's some likelihood of a better outcome. So here again, I think don't just apply and throw away your, energy and your, resources, but I think it might be worth seeking out, either an attorney or at least to try to get a really good understanding of what happened and that your energy might be better spent than just applying over and over and over again. Because if you just keep going like that, I think you just end up looking desperate, and even, less like you'll be able to show non-immigrant intent when you're so desperate to get there, perhaps. So again, that's not, anything specific or legal, but, it just doesn't make sense to keep going. So again, if you weren't able to really address it on the front end or, and haven't figured it out, then yeah, I wouldn't just keep applying. I would wait probably at least 6 months, if not a year, or more before applying again. And hopefully with, things you've done between that time that would only strengthen your case. Maybe you've traveled to other countries and come back, or you've gotten other visas, and done so. Or, you've gotten a better promotion and a stronger job that might be a stronger tie to your country, or you got married or whatever it might be. So I would definitely give it some time, even though there's no official time restriction, before you apply again, after multiple denials especially. So when you do reapply, what will boost your chances of being approved the next time? Certainly, review what we just covered about not having any inconsistencies. That will be easy, between your, application, what you say, all that stuff. And then again, about presenting yourself, your authentic self, without using generic scripts, and so that you can really let your truth and your real motivations come through. So, I say, make sure you do that. And in fact, I would encourage you to watch, our other videos, so that you can get a better understanding of the actual legal requirements of, that you should be able to support your trip, that you, financially, and that you don't have immigrant intent and what that all means, so you can get a better idea of that. Does having a visa denial on your record look bad? Well, yes, certainly. Compared to a clean blank slate, I would say so. But don't lose heart just yet, because I know plenty of people who have a visa denial in their record, a tourist visa denial, and then later on were able to get a tourist visa. And, some of them have been issued, ones with maybe shorter, validity period. But again, you use that visa and it can actually use it to build up a good history of complying with the terms and conditions of the tourist visa, and it can be helpful. So I definitely know people who've gotten it. So don't think that it's just over. And if you have more than one denial, I'll just, say again that I think it's definitely worth, investing your time and energy to really try to understand what happened, so that you don't just do the same thing over and over again. So, maybe consult with an attorney and see if together you can get a better understanding of the reasons for the denial and how to best overcome it, and what the strategy for that, is going forward. And like I mentioned, there can be things beyond just, the U.S. consulate and the application process that you can do to help, because it's all about showing your strong ties to your home country, and again, showing sufficient financial resources. So all that stuff as to how you can best present that in your person-to-person interview with the officer, I think can be helpful, and how you can best showcase it, perhaps even in, the DS form, which I know that's pretty, standard questions like your job history and all that stuff. But I think there are things you can do, kind of at different points and in different angles to really present the full picture of why you don't have immigrant intent and you're qualified to travel to the United States and be a tourist. I hope this gives you some perspective on some common reasons for tourist visa denials and some ways to avoid them. From having spoken to people, I know this can feel really unfair, or like you've done something wrong when you're a law-abiding citizen. So understand that I think of this as the most discretionary process in all of U.S. immigration. So where possible, I definitely recommend you do your best to try to discover the specific reason for the denial so that you can address it. And there's no guarantee, but doing this is better than just applying over and over again. And remember, there are plenty of people who have overcome prior denials. So if you found this helpful, please like the video, and for more like it, please subscribe. Also, please feel free to comment below about any topics you'd like us to cover, as we're definitely considering those as we look to making future videos. As always, I wish you a great rest of your day and hopefully a wonderful trip to the United States.